I feel good. I feel a bit nervous, but yeah, man, let's
Now
turn
you
that
said
nervous
nervous.
energy into something cool
Don't
we
be
can chat
nervous
about.
whatsoever. We'll jump into just some normal conversational questions, just get you warmed up. So we'll start off with who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so my name is Malcolm Mooi. I'm 43 years old, and I am a social entrepreneur. That's what I do for a living.
And what are you currently working on now?
We've got a project called Sibuza.net. It's within the basic education sector. It's essentially a online community engagement platform where we connect teachers with their peers. One of the things that most people don't know is that there are 447,000 teachers in South Africa across the different provinces. So I think it's the largest kind of profession in the country, and so we essentially connect teachers with one another, and then we look at how can we support them from an academic perspective around the subjects, but also from a non-academic perspective. So things like social and emotional well-being, financial literacy, and all of these soft skills that are quite important in terms of, developing and supporting teachers to ensure that they are performing at their best, and in turn teachers are the driving force behind learning. So if we have top performing teachers, then naturally we should have top performing learners.
So it's basically just the fundamentals of foundation of teaching itself. Is that what you guys sort of provide in that, or is it the platform where teachers can find that sort of information or build on those sort of skill sets?
It's a bit of both, and I think from our perspective, right, we play at a technology level, so we provide them with a tech that enables them to connect, and then how they want to then interact is up to them. So we don't try and control. So think about things like access to resources. Not everybody has access to the same resources, and that's where the inequalities come from, right? So what we try and do is we give teachers the space where they can upload their resources like lesson plans, classroom activities, assessments, past exam papers and memos, open textbooks, posters, etc. And then we use that data to basically look at value, right? So quantifiable, how many people are viewing, how many people are downloading, and then also qualitative. That's quite important. So we're not teachers ourselves, so we try and understand the data. So if somebody likes a resource, if they rate and review it, we use that as indicative of, okay, wait a minute, this is where value is being created. And then we take it a step further. We gamify that data. So for example, if you upload a lesson plan and teachers are interacting with it, you get points for that, and that points translates into a monthly leaderboard that gets reset every month. But essentially it gives you a chance to be our teacher of the month. And should you get that accolade, which is 50% reputation points, 50% evidence, we illuminate you to the rest of the teaching community and our network. So
It's like bragging rights.
bragging rights, man. It's all about, it's about status, right? You the teacher of the month. We put you out on social media. We put you out on our networks like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and teachers love recognition. So,
Absolutely.
we kind of, but I mean, we do it authentically as well, right? You can't just get this award. So you earn it, and then we basically put you on a platform. We amplify who you are and your status in the community. On your profile, you get a badge, teacher of the month as well. And then there's 12 months in a year. So every year there's like 12 teachers that we give this award to, and they have a space where they can connect and engage. So it's like-minded people coming together. And then obviously the prestige of it externally as well. We've had some teachers come to us because initially we actually had tangible rewards that went with it. So you could win a stationery pack or airtime, etc. But
Something that you can actually use.
yeah, that you can use. But at the time it was actually quite expensive to deliver that. So for, let's just say, a coffee mug that cost $50, it was costing us $60 just to get it to the teacher. So we were kind of like, okay. But what was interesting is when we started engaging with teachers, they said to us, we're actually not fond of the rewards aspect, but thank you so much for putting me on that newsletter with Teacher of the Month. I printed it out, I gave it to my HOD, I gave it to my principal, and we kind of look at that and saying, well, teachers love recognition more than they do these tangible goods. So until we find a way where we can deliver tangible rewards better, we're kind of focusing on the recognition.
I think from the back end of the story is that I've noticed that a lot of teachers also, besides the recognition, is just that, am I valued?
Correct.
Is my work, is my ethic, is my effort that I'm putting into my passion as a teacher, is that being seen, acknowledged, and valued as, and I think that's where that proudness comes from. Like, hey, listen, I'm being put on blast on all the social media that I'm doing a good job and people are seeing it for what it is, and not just a case of, okay, you're a teacher, that's what you sign up for, so just do your job, type of thing.
And the reality is our teachers are working in adverse circumstances. A lot of the challenges they face are out of their control, and that's where we come in. For us, we're a social partner to government, so we support them. A lot of what we do has been implemented based on their policies and programs that, goes back as far as 2004. So I think this is where we're looking at kind of beyond what we offer as a technology company is also just, collaboration is what we facilitate on every level. So not just teachers connecting, collaborating with other teachers, but who are the other stakeholders? So government, for example, right? If you understand just how vast and complex it is, government gets flack for a lot of stuff like, oh, you're not delivering, oh, we've got, poor outcomes in terms of results, government's failing, that's the typical narrative. But when you dig deeper and you actually understand kind of just the logistics of education, right? So yes, if you look at our country, the biggest portion of our GDP gets spent on education. If you look at corporate in South Africa, corporate social investment, up to 10 billion rand a year gets spent on CSI initiatives, 40% of that going to education. And so, we looked at it and said, like, okay, why is all this money being spent on education, but our education outcomes in terms of learner performance is lowest amongst other countries in the world, right? But then we started delving deeper into it. So instead of blaming government, we kind of like, okay, what does government do? And it was quite fascinating to find out that when you look at education itself and the business of education, government has a feeding scheme where they feed up to 10 million kids a day. When you consider that there's 13 million kids in the system, that's a big operation, man. Show me a company that feeds 10 million people a day. Then you look at transportation, because of the geographic situation in South Africa, some kids have to travel quite far, and there's some legacy stuff as well. I'm not sure if you recall, but as kids, we didn't go to school in our areas. We were bused into other schools, right? So we spend a lot of money on transport. So government transports up to 8 million kids a day. So, when you just look at that, not much gets spent on education, but at the same time, government has to provide these things. There's legacy around backlogs, around infrastructure, etc. And that's where we come in as a social partner. So, we're able to share this data with government as well for them to have an understanding what's happening on the ground. Obviously, the benefits of data is that there's automations and efficiencies, and you can make informed decisions about programs, about investments, and stuff like that. So literally, that's kind of where we act and the role that we play. We also work with organizations, so anything from publishers to coaching to tutoring and those services, and then we aggregate all of those services on one single platform. So as a teacher, you can come in, you get access to the resources you can use to help you better prep. You've got access to knowledge sharing and transfer opportunities, so you can come into Zibuza and become a mentor. And then you can help other teachers who are either coming into the system or need help. We've got a virtual learning environment, which is really cool. Essentially, it's like a 21st century learning management platform where teachers can come in and build lessons and then sell it to learners in our community. So that's something that came about with COVID, like school shut down and a lot of learners were kind of like, they didn't have options. Private schools continued, right? They were able to continue learning, but the large portion of our public sector schooling came to a standstill. So when you look at research, it's like almost something stupid, like 18 months of learning and teaching time lost. Yeah. That's going to have generational kind of impact on our country, right? Massive backlog. So, during that time, we didn't sit on our laurels. We kind of like, okay, what can we do to help this situation, or at least, better prepare so if there's another crisis that happens, that learning can continue. So we've built out this awesome virtual learning environment, that basically helps teachers end to end with planning, and we scaffold that as well. So it's basically steps you walk through. Steps 1 to 6, okay, your planning is sorted. Now it's the design. That's where we look at the pedagogy of teaching, right? What are the outcomes? What are the essential questions? What should learners be able to do? And we've scaffolded that as well. So you go through that process. Now you build your course, and that's multimedia files. So you can add video, audio, whiteboard animations. You can upload resources. That's one side of learning. And then we've built an item bank, which is essentially an assessment tool, right, where you can do diagnostics or formative and summative assessments, whereby each item is a question, an answer, and an explanation, and you link that into your lesson. So as the learner's going through the lessons, they get tested as well. And then from that testing, we're generating kind of data around where's the gaps. So if you have a lesson and a learner goes through the assessment, you can pinpoint exactly to say, okay, where the learner went wrong. And as a teacher now, you have guidance as to where you can change your lesson, so that if a learner comes in, you kind of know that this is the section where learners get lost, cater for that, and then the learner moves on. And so that's our virtual learning environment. We've also...
I am more than impressed.
Thank you.
More than impressed in this information that you've just given us. Like I had no clue that was the things that was going on behind the scenes. Like, and that kept the ball rolling in terms of the education sector, which is vital. I mean, I only knew about the stories that were because of COVID that unfortunately the kids weren't able to physically be inside the classroom and learn, and certain assessments and certain exams to take place. But I think through this platform that has alleviated all of them. Now it
yes.
Was education always the path for you?
Oh, no, not at all. So I'm a computer systems engineer by background. Okay. And I worked in a multinational technology company for about 7 years. I was a corporate guy, kind of like fair track for management. And there was, when I look back now, it's kind of like the dots connected. But at the time, it was just kind of like my life was chaos. So there were a couple of factors. I think the first thing was, being in a position in corporate where I was given an opportunity to develop myself. I found an opportunity in the energy sector that I was spearheading, and it started off as just a basic conversation, funny enough, around this period, around Easter weekend. And it spawned into a R1 billion opportunity that we were leading. And so I spent kind of many years on that. And then when it came down to it, I had a fallout with management, So it's like, okay, this deal, 1.4 billion rand. I'm kind of like a junior, guy coming into it, obviously working in a global company, kind of alarm bells going off and saying, hey man, this is a significant deal, and who's this guy that's assigned to it? And I think for me at that stage, it was kind of like, corporate and loyalty. At that point, there wasn't there. Personally, I was also in a long distance relationship with a lady in the USA, and so I needed my time to travel back and forth.
You have to look after the relationship.
You have to look after the relationship, and I think, those were the factors that made me leave corporate. And when I left corporate, now I'm traveling back and forth, and I'm kind of like still working on this opportunity, and I had all this time on myself, and so I literally had to unlearn and learn new skills in terms of like this corporate mindset versus an entrepreneurial mindset. Now, bear in mind, this is 2009. People don't know what entrepreneurship is. When people ask me what do I do, I'm kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, right?
The connotations that also went with it. It was almost like when someone said, "No, I'm an entrepreneur."
Yeah.
I don't have a job. Just
you're unemployed.
You're unemployed. Just say that, like.
Yeah.
There wasn't the stigma that's attached to being an entrepreneur now, and owning your own business as what it is right now today.
Correct.
2009, people were just like, no, man.
Yeah. I think for me, having been there at the beginning, is for me, entrepreneurship really just started to come into the fore kind of 2014, 2015. And I mean, we've had support from some major companies, even like Microsoft, who kind of right now have identified us as a priority partner of theirs. But back then, right, part of the BizSpark program, we literally with like, here's business cards. Which at the time made a difference, right? Because you walk into a meeting, guys are like, okay, who are you? Like, I'm Malcolm from this company. They're like, oh, we don't know this company. So your best thing was then having a business card. So when I went in, at least we seemed a bit professional because we had business cards. But I remember it was so funny. My business partner at the time, we couldn't afford like individual business cards, so we had both our names on the one card. So I mean, that's where we started, right? But over the years, kind of evolving with Microsoft and them learning about entrepreneurs and how to work with startups, like the full evolution has gone full circle, like literally from business cards into coaching, into the app factory, which helped build version 3 of our platform. And then to this point, which is why I said it went full circle, is Microsoft was our first commercial customer. They took out a campaign where we promoted their Innovator Expert program. And so now they're a customer of ours and a partner. So, you know, that's kind of the journey that we've gone through. But back to the story about how I kind of, where I started and how we came in. So that happened, and it took about 2 years after I left corporate for a tender to come out. And I had a lot of time. So during that time, I was taking on new skills. And as entrepreneurs, I don't like the word hustle, but you know, we kind of like, you have to become creative, resourceful. You gotta kind of, you know, persevere. And man, it was crazy how things just unfolded. Like I got access to a course in Stanford in the USA. I did a course on entrepreneurship. You know, that really upped my game in terms of how I communicated about my ideas and the business, not a business plan, but a business canvas. And then the tender came out for the energy bid. We were going to put in a bid, and then the same kind of sour management and my ex-employer, they kind of like 2 weeks in, they said, no, they're not going to submit the bid because they were burnt previously. And I was like, wow. But at that stage, I had made peace with it, right? But I also found that I had like a natural kind of draw towards entrepreneurship and solving problems. So I started feeling that. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Was this a one-hit wonder in terms of architecting this deal, or can I apply myself somewhere else, right? And at that point, I remember sitting at our table, kind of working, and the news was playing in the background, and it was Limpopo textbook crisis, 6 months into the school year, and kids still don't have textbooks. And I was like, what? So there was like, okay, light bulb moment, and I was like, okay, let's digitize textbooks and give every kid a tablet device, and like let's automate the logistics and everything. And when you look at the amount of money that gets spent on textbooks, I was like, wow, you know. So yeah, that's
I saw as a trip in terms of like the pricing, and I think it's only but gotten worse.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so, I mean, that was our baptism of fire into education, is thinking we'd solve that problem. And then when you start speaking to teachers and other stakeholders, you realize, okay, wait a minute, that's actually not the problem. Actually, there's a bigger problem. Yes. And coming from that multinational, having access to a global intranet of experts, I was kind of like, there's no culture of sharing and collaboration in basic education at all levels. Teachers.
I feel like you found like the root, or you entering that segment, you found the root and you found, wait, this root is actually spurting out
exactly
the different problems that have never been, no light has been shed on these before.
So on the surface, it seems like there's these problems, right? But when you dig deeper and you look at kind of the trends and the common things, I think that's one of my strengths, is being able to see through the chaos and see patterns and stuff. And I was like, okay, if only you and you spoke to one another, you'll realize the problem is not actually the textbook. There's a different problem at play. And kind of that's where Zibuza.net was born. And even the word Zibuza came from isiZulu for we ask. And for me, kind of in the education space, the kind of observation was like, our education system produces people that are capable at best, and then there's a small segment that goes on to tertiary education, and that's where you become your intelligent people, kind of, you know, getting your degrees and qualifications. But one thing I noticed is what's missing is the intellectual capabilities of what our education system produces. There's nobody that can take the intelligence and apply it and then, you know, come up with something new. So, for example, you know, you can study medicine and become a professional doctor and see to patients. But how many doctors do you know that take it one step further and create new tech or a new way of doing things?
Engagement with their patients, for instance, or making it feel more of a, not necessarily just a profession that, hey, listen, I'm just your doctor, but let's get on an intellectual sort of basis where, you know, I can feel comfortable. I should feel at ease in a doctor's office and not have to dread having to actually, you know, there's new initiatives and new ways of, treating a patient, for instance. I'm up for it. Instead of the old school.
Well, think about it, right? Before, old school had to book an appointment, go sit in a doctor's office, get examined, medication, and off you go. Whereas now, when you look at kind of what's happening, when I say intellectual wise, people have realized do you really need to go into a doctor's office? Telemedicine is booming, and not just for like your general practitioners, but health experts as well. You can call in and speak to a psychologist or speak about a therapist, right? Wearables. I mean, my heart rate, my sleep, all these vitals are being tracked throughout. I can share that as well. And you think about your records. You go to a doctor, he writes it down. That doctor has your records. What about my history for my medical records? So that is the innovation when we speak about intellectuals. And so Zibuza is all about, these social networks that lead to kind of like-minded people that have a common purpose or interest that come together and are able to be curious and kind of like, what's the next best thing we can open up? And for us, the values always remain the same. So it's about inclusivity and being more equitable in terms of access, because our country also has a legacy where some people were excluded from contributing and participating in these opportunities. So everything we do, there's always intention behind, okay, if we make these resources available to people, what does that mean for them? If we can pair people up, coaches, with people that are new or are struggling, what are the opportunities that come out there? And we've got so many awesome success stories about people that connected on Zibuza, that helped each other and went on to kind of bigger and better things. So we had a teacher in rural Mpumalanga, and he saw another lady from Gauteng, from a more privileged kind of background. She posted about a Microsoft Innovator Expert certification, and he reached out to her and said, hey man, I want to get the Microsoft certification as well. Can you help me? She's like, sure. So without us even knowing, right, they connected on Zibuza, started engaging with another. And as that relationship grew, he was kind of like, hey man, I'm applying for the National Teaching Awards, which is the most prestigious award, in the teaching profession. Can you help me with that application? She's like, sure, no problem. So she helped him kind of with his presentation and stuff like that. This guy finished second in Mpumalanga province for 2021. And so that is kind of like, for us, our impact is, without us even knowing, people are connecting, and then using all the different kind of facilities that we provide them, are able to unlock all these opportunities. We've got so many awesome stories, man. We have a lady known as our techno granny, Maputi Rabukhala, from Limpopo, rural Limpopo, retired school principal, phenomenal, working in the community. And so we've got an initiative called Isitumbu, which is early childhood development around literacy. And she saw a post about some of our books, because we host an annual book fair. And she was like, oh, these resources are so wonderful. I'd love to have some for kids in my community. And so we're like, okay, cool. When are you back up in Joburg? She's just like, no, I'm coming December. So December, at the offices here, we handed out like a pack of books that she took back to the kids. And then we organized a read along, which was virtual. Yeah. So through Skype, the author of the book read to the kids, and the kids could interact and ask questions. And so for us, again, it was like, wow. The theme around that is today a reader, tomorrow a leader. And so all these kids now have their own books. And when you look at some of the stats, man, in terms of kids that don't own books in their lifetime, for us, these kids own the book. There's a coloring in book companion, there's a string bag that's branded. So there's identity, there's pride that goes with that. And so, that's the impact that we're having in communities.
Love it, Malcolm. So with that being said, how can you, as Malcolm, as Zibuza, leverage the Barter through obviously Barter Smart? How can you guys, using your platform, collaborate or use the platform in the marketplace itself?
So for me, the concept itself is very interesting. As a startup, you're always limited in terms of capital. So, we're not going to necessarily be able to afford permanent employees, but the bartering could be a place where, if you're an expert, like a graphic designer or a copywriter, right, is that we could barter in terms of exposing you to our community and marketplace. Yes. And where you then create value, the exchange is then that you get something in return. So if you look at our community that we're building, there's 447,000 teachers, there's 13 million learners across 24,000 schools. So as we grow that ecosystem out, the opportunity is for other people to come in and contribute to that community, whether in a volunteering capacity. So for example, you might be finished with school and you did quite well at subjects like maths or history. You could come in and register as a tutor on the platform, and then kids come into the community and they can connect with you in terms of saying, hey, help me out, I don't understand this, or I'm stuck here. Similarly, you could come on board as a coach to coach teachers. You've seen the evolution of teaching, which is no longer just traditionally in the classroom. Teachers are now having to go virtual and teach online. So, if you have expertise, you can come in and coach teachers on how to produce lessons that they can publish online. That forms part of our marketplace where, like I said, you can build and sell courses on Zibuza. And it's quite a low kind of, barrier in terms of cost. So you don't have to pay to become a member. Also, when you're working with teachers, there's an agreement up front where you have a sliding scale revenue share model. So if I'm a teacher and I invite you in because you're a graphic designer, I could allocate 10% or 15% depending of that sales to you. So for every 100 Rand, you're getting 15 Rand for your contribution to the course that I've built. But if you don't sell anything, or if you set it at zero, then there's no cost for you to host your content on our site either. We also work with sponsors. So for example, if you create an awesome course on how to explain maths and those types of concepts where kids typically struggle, we could match make you with a corporate sponsor, so the corporate pays for you to produce more content. But like I said, man, we provide in the canvas, and whoever wants to come on board and paint on the canvas, like, we're not dictating. You're more than welcome to come and add value.
No, then I should come and I should barter with you guys. I should barter with you guys. And just to close off lastly, what would you say are the challenges that you have faced in the last 5 years?
Wow. Capital is one of them. So as a startup, I think you're always limited in terms of like your vision. If I think about Zibuza's journey, it took us 2 years to raise our first kind of corporate social investment. That was with Investec. So I think it was only version 4 of the platform that was actually kind of like, wow, this is what we wanted. And everybody was like, wow, this looks really awesome. And I was like, yeah, we've been selling this vision for 4 years before it actually became a reality, right? So I think the difficult thing as a startup is the mindset of you're going to fail, you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have rejections. And, until you get through that threshold, there's more failures, setbacks, and rejections waiting for you. So for us, it's about how do we become resourceful without any money? How do we become resilient in terms of being able to endure and kind of proceed, and then just also having the patience. So in our space, there's definitely a maturity and an adoption factor that we need to work within. So we can't force teachers to embrace technology, so we got to work with them and be patient with them. So I think capital helps, but again, if we had the capital, then we probably would waste it, because you don't know what you don't know. So I have no regrets and I wouldn't change anything. But yeah, those are the challenges. You have to come into an environment where it's capital intensive, but you don't have the capital. And then you start adjusting yourself to meet that, right? Access to market is another big one. So we've got partnerships with the Department of Basic Education, but it took us 3 years to get there because we had to be vetted. And government, like I said, they can't just take somebody. Imagine they partner with me, I get $1 million and I'm in Mauritius on the beach posing. Again, it's a story in the media. So for them, yeah, they have to make sure that, you are not just a fly-by-night or a swindler, you actually are genuine. So again, when you look at the time it takes, right now people look at us like, oh wow, you're doing such amazing things. But if they spoke to me 6 years ago, they'd be like, okay, wow, this guy is crazy. So those are the challenges. I think on my side, it's also building a team. I think the cause that we're focusing on is like massively transformative. So people naturally want to give up their time. But I think for us, it was about like, how do we build a team to, deliver and implement what it is, our vision. And so when you don't have capital, you can't pay people salaries, So for us, we had to adapt and be like, okay, let's have a virtual team of like on demand. So when we get capital in, we need to do this. Okay, let's allocate capital to that. But once it's finished, we kind of move on from that. And not have kind of the burden. And burden is maybe not a good word, but that's exactly what it is, right? If you have to pay salaries every month, you're responsible for people and their families. So it is a huge burden on the business when you don't have the predictability, because we're still trying to prove our product market fit in terms of, so we know where we can make money from it. But again, it's like if you charge a subscription fee, then people get excluded because a lot of people can't afford it. So we had to keep our costs low so we can be agile and adaptive in what we do. So access to market was another one. And I think the biggest challenge in these startup environments is the founder themselves. So even for myself, I've had to evolve in terms of who I am and how do I grow and mature as a founder to lead people, to manage teams, to deal with stakeholders, to deal with funders. And that is quite difficult as well. But yeah, those are the three things that I would say are your challenges that you got to face.
Okay, wow. Lastly, before I send you off, maybe just speak to the people directly to camera and give maybe a quote or anything that you feel is of good advice to your network or to the network of audience.
Okay, wow, that's putting me on the spot. I would say one of the things that's stood well with me over many years is a quote. I'm not quite sure who said it, but it is fail fast, fail forward, and fail often. If you can adopt that mindset of just, moving beyond what you think the world should be and kind of, persisting through these failures, setbacks, and rejections, then you're on your pathway. It seems counterintuitive, but your failures are stepping stones to success. That would be my advice.